Castle by Franz Kafka. Chapter 4. I am your narrator. He would have liked an intimate talk with Frida, but the assistants hindered this simply by their importunate presence, and Frida too laughed and joked with them from time to time. Otherwise, they were not at all exacting. They had simply settled down in a corner on two old skirts spread out on the floor. They made it a point of honor, as they repeatedly assured Frida, not to disturb the land surveyor and to take up as little room as possible. And in pursuit of this intention, although with a good deal of whispering and giggling, they kept on trying to squeeze themselves into smaller compass, crouching together in the corner so that in the dim light they looked like one large bundle. From his experience of them by daylight, however, Kay was all too conscious that they were acute observers and never took their eyes off him. Whether they were fooling like children and using their hands as spyglasses, or merely glancing at him while apparently completely absorbed in grooming their beards, on which they spent much thought and which they were forever comparing in length and thickness, calling on Frida to decide between them. From his bed, Kay often watched the antics of all three with the completest indifference. When he felt himself well enough to leave bed, they all ran to serve him. He was not yet strong enough to ward off their services, and noted that brought him into a state of dependence on which might have evil consequences, but he could not help it. Nor was it really unpleasant to drink at the table with good coffee which Frida had bought, to warm himself up at the stove which Frida had lit, and to have the assistants racing 10 times up and down the stairs in their awkwardness and zeal to fetch him soap and water, comb and looking glass, and eventually even a glass of rum, because he had hinted in a low voice at his desire for one. Among all this giving orders and being waited on, Kay said, more out of good humour than any hope of being obeyed, "Go away now, you two. I need nothing more for the present. I want to speak to Fraulein Frida by herself." And when he saw no opposition on their faces, he added by way of excusing them, "We three shall go to the village superintendent afterwards, so wait downstairs in the bar for me." Strangely enough, they obeyed him, only turning to say before going, "We could wait here." But Kay answered, "I know, but I don't want you to wait here." It annoyed him, however, and yet in a sense pleased him when Frida, who had settled on his knee as soon as the assistants were gone, said, "What's your objection to the assistants, darling? We don't need to have any mysteries before them. They are true friends." "Oh, true friends?" said Kay. "They keep spying on me the whole time. It's nonsensical, but abominable." "I believe I know what you mean," she said. And she clung to his neck and tried to say something else, but could not go on speaking. And since their chair was so close to it, they reeled over and fell on the bed. There they lay, but not in the forgetfulness of the previous night. She was seeking, and he was seeking. They raged and contorted their faces and bored their heads into each other's bosoms in the urgency of seeking something, and their embraces and their tossing limbs did not avail to make them forget, but only reminded them of what they sought. Like dogs, desperately tearing up the ground, they tore at each other's bodies, and often, helplessly baffled, in a final effort to attain happiness, they nuzzled and tongued each other's faces. Sheer weariness stilled them at last and brought them gratitude to each other. Then the maids came in. "Look how they're lying there," said one, and sympathetically cast a coverlet over them. When somewhat later Kay freed himself from the coverlet and looked round, the two assistants, and he was not surprised at that, were again in their corner, and with a finger jerked towards Kay, nudged each other to a formal salute. But besides them, the landlady was sitting near the bed, knitting away at a stocking, an infinitesimal piece of work hardly suited to her enormous bulk, which almost darkened the room. "I've been here for a long time," she said, lifting up her broad and much furrowed face, which was, however, still rounded and might once have been beautiful. The word sounded like a reproach, an ill-timed reproach, for Kay had not desired her to come. So he merely acknowledged them by a nod and sat up. Frida also got up, but left Kay to lean over the landlady's chair. "If you want to speak to me," said Kay, in bewilderment, "couldn't you put it off until I come back from visiting the superintendent? I have important business with him." "This is important, believe me, sir," said the landlady. "Your other business is probably only a question of work, but this concerns a living person, Frida, my dear maid." "Oh, if that's it," said Kay, "then of course you're right, but I don't see why we can't be left to settle our own affairs." "Because I love and care for her," said the landlady, drawing Frida's head towards her. For Frida, as she stood only, reached up to the landlady's shoulder. "Since Frida put such confidence in you," cried Kay, "I must do the same. And since not long ago Frida called my assistants true friends, we are all friends together. So I can tell you that what I would like best would be for Frida and myself to get married. The sooner, the better." I know I'll never be able to make up to Frida for all she has lost for my sake. Her position in the Herrenhof and her friendship with Clam. Frida lifted up her face. Her eyes were full of tears and had not a trace of triumph. Why am I chosen out from other people?" "What?" asked Kay. And the landlady simultaneously. "She's upset, poor child," said the landlady. "Upset by the conjunction of too much happiness and unhappiness." And as if in confirmation of those words, Frida now flung herself upon Kay, kissing him wildly, as if there were nobody else in the room, and then weeping, but still clinging to him, fell on her knees before him. While he caressed Frida's hair with both hands, Kay asked the landlady, "You seem to have no objection." You are a man of honor, said the landlady, who also had tears in her eyes. She looked a little worn and breathed difficultly, but she found strength enough to say, "There's only the question now of what guarantees you are to give Frida. For great as is my respect for you, you're a stranger here. There's nobody here who can speak to you. Your family circumstances aren't known here, so some guarantee is necessary." "You must see that, my dear sir, and indeed, you touched on it yourself when you mentioned how much Frida must lose through her association with you." "Of course, guarantees, most certainly," said Kay. "But they'll be best given before the notary, and at the same time other officials of the Count's will perhaps be concerned. Besides, before I'm married, there's something I must do. I must have a talk with Clam." "That's impossible," said Frida, raising herself a little and pressing close to Kay. "What an idea!" "But it must be done," said Kay. "If it's impossible for me to manage it, you must." "I can't, Kay. I can't," said Frida. "Clam will never talk to you. How can you even think of such a thing?" "And won't he talk to you?" asked Kay. "Not to me either," said Frida. "Neither to you nor to me. It's simply impossible." She turned to the landlady with outstretched arms. "You see what he's asking for?" "You're a strange person," said the landlady. And she was an awe-inspiring figure now that she sat more upright, her legs spread out and her enormous knees projecting under her thin skirt. "You ask for the impossible." "Why is it impossible?" said Kay. "That's what I'm going to tell you," said the landlady in a tone which sounded as if her explanation were less a final concession to friendship than the first item in a score of penalties she was enumerating. "That's what I shall be glad to let you know. Although I don't belong to the castle, and am only a woman, only a landlady here in an inn of the lowest kind, it's not of the very lowest, but not far from it, and on the account you may not perhaps set much store by my explanation. Still, I have kept my eyes open all my life and met many kinds of people and taken the whole burden of the inn on my shoulders. For my Martin is no landlord, although he's a good man, and responsibility is a thing he'll never understand. It's only his carelessness, for instance, that you've got to thank. For I was tired to death on that evening. For being here in the village at all, for sitting here on this bed in peace and comfort." "What?" said Kay, walking from a kind of absent-minded distraction, pricked more by curiosity than anger. "Yes, it's only his carelessness. You've got to thank for it," cried the landlady again, pointing with her forefinger at Kay. Frida tried to silence her. "I can't help it," said the landlady with a swift turn of her whole body. "The land surveyor asked me a question, and I must answer it. There's no other way of making him understand what we take for granted, that Herr Clam will never speak to him, will never speak. Did I say can never speak to him? Just listen to me, sir. Herr Clam is a gentleman from the castle, and that in itself, without considering Clam's position there at all, means that he is of a very high rank. But what are you, for whose marriage we are humbly considering here ways and means of getting permission? You are not from the castle, you are not from the village, you aren't anything. Or rather, unfortunately, you are something, a stranger, a man who isn't wanted and is in everybody's way, a man who is causing trouble, a man who takes up the maid's room, a man whose intentions are obscure, a man who has ruined our dear little Frida, and whom we must unfortunately accept as her husband. I don't hold all that up against you. You are what you are, and I have seen enough in my lifetime to be able to face facts. But now consider what it is you ask. A man like Clam is to talk with you. It vexed me to hear that Frida let you look through the peephole. When she did that, she was already corrupted by you. But just tell me, how did you have the face to look at Clam? You needn't answer. I know you think you're quite equal to the occasion. You're not even capable of seeing Clam as he really is. That's not merely an exaggeration, for I myself am not capable of it either. Clam is to talk to you, and yet Clam doesn't even talk to the people from the village. Never yet has he spoken a word himself to anyone in the village. It was Frida's great distinction, a distinction I'll be proud of to my dying day, that he used at least to call out her name, and that she could speak to him whenever she liked, and was permitted the freedom of the peephole. But even to her he never talked, and the fact that he called her name didn't mean of necessity what one might think. He simply mentioned the name Frida. Who can tell what he was thinking? And that Frida naturally came to him at once was her affair, and that she admitted without let or hindrance was an act of grace on Clam's part. But that he deliberately summoned her is more than one can maintain. Of course, that's all over for good now. Clam may perhaps call Frida as before. That's possible. But she'll never again be admitted to his presence. A girl who has thrown herself away upon you. And there's just one thing my poor head can't understand. That a girl who had the honor of being known as Clam's mistress, a wild exaggeration in my opinion, should have allowed you even to lay a finger on her.